One, two, ladies and gentlemen, what's going on? This is Preach Jacobs once again with another episode of the Worthy Cause podcast on the Arena Network, a place where I want to talk to really, really dope and interesting people that are involved in the political process, or they're involved in artists or business people in the community. We are up early in the morning for, it might not be early for you, early for me, I'm an artist, but like, it might be early in the morning to talk to Representative Jermaine Johnson, who's been involved in the community. And we're going to talk a little bit more about some of your initiatives. And one of the things that I'm really, really excited about being able to have this platform is to be able to talk to African Americans that are involved in the political process, because there's a part of coming from hip hop culture where there's this idea that being involved not only in running for something, but also voting is something that is an ignored thing, because young people think that, there's not a reason for me to run. There's a thesis question that I usually have when I want to speak to my people here, where I always say that me being as a creative for many years, being involved with artistic things and being involved in trying to do grand designs of creativity, of art, culture, people are always telling me growing up, you need to move from South Carolina. You need to leave South Carolina. And I stayed. And so I always tell people that for me to decide to stay is a revolutionary act. So my question would be, before we get into anything else, is why South Carolina for you? Not only why did you stay, but tell me the motivations in your story that made you want to run.
Yeah. I appreciate y'all having me on here today, man, to talk about this. I think more young Black folk need to get involved with this process and understand exactly how these things work, and stop just listening to other individuals who are uninformed. Because we have that problem. And if we actually knew the power that we had, I think we'd have a little bit more involvement from people that look like you and I. I played basketball at the College of Charleston. And when I was down there playing basketball at the College of Charleston, I actually met my wife there. And when I met my wife there, that's actually how I ended up in the district that I now represent. It's just by meeting my wife. But I was at an event some years ago, talking to some people, and a lady, she asked me, she goes, Jermaine, I didn't know you were a doctor. And I said, yeah, I'm a doctor of business. And she said, I didn't know that. And she said, and your wife, she's a doctor, right? I said, yeah, my wife she's a doctor of pharmacy. She was like, and you're young and you're Black and you still live here? And I was like, I said, yes, ma'am, I still live here. She's like, and you still live in this community? And I said, yes, ma'am. But it was funny, but it was also heartbreaking to hear her say that, because she assumed and just expected a young, educated Black person to leave his community behind and to get out and to move on up, or do that type of thing. And I don't believe in that. I believe in staying. I believe in passing on the torch to the next generation. I believe in allowing some of these young people who look like me and you to actually see somebody and say, you know what, I can be him. Like, I can do what he does. I can grow up to do what he did. Just because we come from this environment or we've gone through these experiences, it doesn't limit my my ability to go places and to get higher. So my motivation has always been to inspire that next generation.
I think that's interesting, because I feel like when you feel the tension of young Black folks involved in the political or civil process, you can kind of understand why they're discouraged, right? It's like, all right, as we speak, today is Confederate Memorial Day, and I wrote something about that, and hopefully it'll go up today. But I'm in Columbia, and I remember before that Confederate flag was taken down off the State House, I used to see it every day when I would go to work, when I worked on Main Street. And it was like that constant reminder. I also said in the article, during the pandemic, I DJ on the side and stuff like that, where they would do these porch parties for the community during the pandemic. and I'm in an area called Cottontown, and and I'm DJing on Confederate Street, you know, and so there were always these constant reminders. And you're talking about Charleston. I know there's reminders of a not so excited past for Black folks, but I always felt like, you know, if I'm going to be here, I want to make it better. And I know that's sometimes a difficult process. So when you're talking to young Black people in the community, what are some of the reasons are you hearing people feeling discouraged about the process, and what type of response do you give them to encourage them to say, hey, here's how you can be civically active. Here's the importance of voting. When you're hitting these streets and knocking on these doors, what are some of the things that you're hearing from people that look like you in the community?
Well, the main thing that I hear is that my vote doesn't count. My vote doesn't count, and they like as in the system, they already know who they want. They already know who they're going to put in these positions. And that's the biggest thing. But and that is the fault of the misconception about how politics and civics actually function and how it works. Because when you're trying to elect the president, you have the electoral college. So I understand your frustration in that process. It's not about the population vote, the popular vote, and any of that type of stuff. It's about the electoral college. But when you come to every other single race that is out there, it is all about galvanizing the people to come out and vote. And I explain to these individuals, I say, hey, listen, I always ask them, I say, how many people do you have in your senior class, in your senior high school class? And they'll tell me how many people they have in senior high school class. I say, all right, well, then guess what? I say, a lot of these elections are decided by 1,000, 2,000 people. So if you just get your entire senior class to come on out and vote for you can actually get in a position of power. And I put it to them like that. And they said, man, like, are you sure that it's only that many people that are actually voting? I said, yeah, we've got a small turnout of people. So you all as young people can actually change the power of this vote. And I was able to, just go into my own race when I first ran for office. The guy I ran against was actually 50 years older than me. He was literally 50 years older than me. I'm the young guy. I'm the young guy that's voting. And when I won my election that night, I went on Facebook because I was able to galvanize a lot of young people to get out and vote. And I went on Facebook and I saw a guy's status, and he said, "Man, this is one of those guys that he ain't never been a part of the political process. He ain't been ain't one of them type of guys, right?" And he put a post up. He said, "Man, this is the very first time in my life I actually felt like my vote counted." And when I read that vote, I mean, listen, but the tears came out of my eyes on that one because I was like, man, these individuals, they are now starting to believe in something, and they see somebody that they can identify with. Somebody that comes from their struggle, that comes from them, that looks like them, that sounds like them, that dressed like them, that's in the gyms with them, and they actually have somebody that represented them. And they feel like that politicians only show up during election time, which is why I promised myself that I would be the most accessible elected official that this district had ever seen, because I wanted to make sure that I was seen, that I was showing up not just during election time, but on the off years, just going to the gyms and hanging out with these kids, volunteering, doing that type of stuff. So they really just need to know that you're a normal, down to earth person. And just one last story about this whole situation. I was out, I do a lot of volunteering in terms of like litter pickups and things like that, because I believe if you believe in your community, you lead your community, you should be investing in cleaning up your community. So I'm on the side of the road picking up trash with some other volunteers. And these kids is out there, these young people, they out there talking trash about politicians. They're like, man, these guys don't never come out and hang out with us. They don't never talk to us. They're doing that. I'm like, are y'all for real? Like, y'all ain't never met none? Like, y'all never met any elected officials? Nah, man, these guys they don't believe in us. They don't come talk to us. I'm like, oh, for real? Well, you talking to one right now. And they was like, oh my God. So the thing is, they didn't even think that I was even capable of being one because of how I look, because of what they assume a politician looks like. They all look old, or like old white men. And I'm like, nah, man, like, look, you can be me. You can do what I do. I'm not an old white guy. I'm a young Black kid, who's out here trying to make a difference for all.
It's really interesting, man, because there's always, with South Carolina politics more specifically, there's always this idea of, I get uncomfortable when people use words like tradition, because like when white folks get nostalgic, I get uncomfortable, because when people start, imagining, oh, wow, it was so great during this time. I'm like, well, where was my people? Yeah, where were we during this time? And so, when I think of like, the Senate seats that we had here, I know when Jamie Harrison was running for the Senate seat, and I was so excited because it was one of those it was one of those things where it was an accurate perception for me, where I think on a national level, people were really, really behind Jamie in this Senate seat. But the reality was the rest of the country don't vote for this seat. And so all the national attention that he got, I thought he had a chance. And then he kind of just got, swept immediately. And when I thought about this Lindsey Graham seat, he's had that seat for like 20 years by that time. The one that had it 50 years prior to that was Strom Thurmond, right? And it becomes one of those things where you're like, oh, wow, there's 70 years of some types of policies that are in place. Strom ran for president as a Dixiecrat, which one of their highlights was embracing segregation. And so sometimes it's become like one of those things that's really difficult to break those curses. And a lot of times it's like, do we just wait until people die out of office before we start to run? But I think what you're saying was accurate, because I think that when people think about politics, they only think about national elections and things like that, where I think that local elections and local people in the community, that's going to be the foundation of things changing in the community. I'm interested in hearing about some of your initiatives you have going on. You told me about this statewide tour that you got. Please tell me what you're doing and how it impacts young Black and brown people in the community.
Yeah, so recently, this past week, I actually announced a statewide tour that I'm going to be doing. And it actually kicks off on May 11th. And I'm doing this in collaboration with the Gangs and Peace organization. And what they do is they are a bunch of former gang members, Bloods, Crips, GDs, Vice Lords, those individuals who are really trying to make a difference in the community. They're trying to stop the gun violence and trying to stop the criminal activity and things that are going on. So I'm working in collaboration with them to go across the state to really hear issues that are going on in these different communities. And it's not the politicals, the political folk that we always hear from and see. It's not these panel discussions that we always do. It's not these forums that we always do. We're going to the communities to get the disengaged people, the individuals who are really the target individuals to understand, why aren't you involved? What's going on in your community? What are the issues that you're seeing in your neighborhood? What type of things do you need from people like me to help make your life better? Because most of us in these communities, we want the same thing. We want to be safe. We want to have food on our tables. We want to have a good paying job. We want to be able to go to school, and we want to be able to go to church without being shot at. We want these different types of things. But the problem is they don't feel like anybody is representing them the way that they need to be represented. And if you go to these different communities, ask them, I ask them all the time, how many politicians have you ever met? How many elected officials have you ever met? How many of them have come and sit down and actually had a conversation with you without their own personal agenda? How many of them actually really, truly do care about what's going on? How many of them have shown up at your church not during election time? How many of them are actually doing these types of things? And a lot of these people, they're going to be like none. I don't know any of them. So I've been trying to change that whole narrative, which is why I'm going statewide. And I don't think it should be just a matter of me sitting in my district or me sitting in my community, because everybody needs some help. And a lot of these young kids, they need to see somebody who looks like me. I don't plan on being in this seat 30, 40 years like a lot of these guys. I'm trying to find this seat. I'm trying to find these people and make this state better than the way I found it, so I can move on and pass it to somebody else, which is why I started my leadership development fellowship. I started that so that I can do succession planning, so I could teach these young people that, hey, listen, you can be me. You can do these different types of things. You can learn these things, but allow me to help you to do this. Because the person who came before me said he didn't believe in succession planning.
So that leadership program is called New 52 Leadership. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, the Leadership Development Fellowship is a 6-week free program where I get young people under the age of 40, and I bring them into this program to teach them about school leadership, political leadership, community leadership, church leadership, just leadership concepts. In general, to help them understand that you don't have to even be an elected official to be a leader. You don't need permission from anybody to be a leader. You can just go out there and start doing what you need to do. Because a lot of times people, they wait until somebody gives them permission before they take the reins of leadership in whatever capacity in which it is. So I'm trying to get them to understand all the different concepts of leadership, and I bring in different individuals. Like the last one I had Bakari Sellers came on and spoke to the people. Andrew Yang, who I used to work for when he was running for president, he came on and spoke to the people. And it's a nonpartisan leadership development fellowship that I do. So I have Republicans. I had the Republican Freedom Caucus leader R.J. May. He came on and spoke to him. I had people to come talk to me because it's not about the red or the blue. It's about getting people to understand the collective power that they have and help them to
Oh, you
galvanize and
said
save their
40 and
community.
under young people. I just turned 40, so I feel bad that I'm not like, well, young people.
I'm 38, bro, so I'm on my way. I'm
I,
38.
I think that's really, really important because I feel like trying to get people to know that they can be civically engaged just outside of the voting booth. I think that's really, really important. And a lot of times I feel like I'm really interested in telling the community, like, hey, for an example, I wrote this column for NPR where I was in the fundraising sector um, for public radio and public television. And one of the things that I noticed is that when they would get these people to come in and talk to us about statistics and be like, hey, here's what clients look like that donate money. It's always like, oh, they're 50 plus year old white people and blah, 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 blah. And I'm kind of like, well, why are we not focusing on the African American community that gives? And I was kind of showing this blind spot to public media about like how you guys are ignoring Black givers, because I'm saying to myself, look, they might not have the amount of money as affluent white folks, but when my granny used to give when she was going to church every week, she might not have a lot of money, but she gave every single week. And so there's this commitment of being involved. And one of the things I talked about was the idea of quarter parties, where you had if there were people that lived in an apartment complex and it's January, for January, my neighbors will cook food and bring some stuff to my house. We'll charge money for people to come in and dance or come to a party, and I can use that money to pay my rent. That next month, we're going to do the same thing for our neighbor. That next month, we're going to do the same thing for our neighbor. And so when I talk to people about those type of things, that's just kind of normal in the Black community growing up. I'm like, that's being politically active. Like that's the same thing as organizing. That's the same thing as being a community activist, finding those different pockets to kind of figuring out new ways to take care of the community. So I'm interested, right? Kind of sidebar when we're talking about gang violence and gang culture. I always have a way of going back to thinking about hip hop culture where I came from, and I remember I was having a conversation with a friend of mine years ago, and I was like, you know what? Like when I grew up, like Snoop was the biggest like guy in the world. Like in the early like '94, he couldn't do no wrong. Now the funny thing about Snoop is that now he's become this beloved character in all these commercials. It's absolutely hilarious. But there was a point in time where there was a huge outcry from Black folks in the civil rights community, and I remember I was having a conversation with a friend of mine. I'm driving around listening to Doggy Style as a 30-something-year-old person at the time, and it just felt very, very harsh, right? And I was like, damn. I was like, yeah. I was like, C. Dolores Tucker might have been right. You know what I mean? When you have C. Dolores Tucker, who was like really, really anti-gangster rap, or the Dionne Warwicks of the world, in my mind as a young Black kid, I'm like, yo, I want us to be able to express ourselves. But if you got somebody that march with Dr. King, and they're listening to "Ain't No Fun Unless the Homies Have Some," I can see them saying, "What is all of this?" And so my thing is, when we're talking about those type of energies and dealing with gang culture and gang violence, number one, when you look at something like the Kendrick Lamar Drake situation, which I think is hilarious to bring up, right? Because damn it, you're gonna be the only politician I can talk to about this. what what was some of your responses to that type of battle? If you've been keeping up with it, who do you think won?
I've been keeping up with that, man. Look, I've been keeping up with that. Listen, but so for that battle right there, I mean I don't know if everybody agrees with me, but I appreciated the way that Kendrick was throwing in some historical stuff in there. He was throwing in some like life lessons. He was throwing in life lessons about being a good father. I mean, all different types of things that I think people need to hear. And he mixed it in there to where you can like be like, ooh, like hit him with this, ooh, ooh, ooh. but it was also some stuff like, dang, that makes sense. That makes sense. I appreciated that because the way rap and drill rap and all that stuff is going these days, you don't get any of those type of life lessons. It's just I'll shoot you, I'll kill you, I'm slinging drugs, I'm doing that in the third. But with that whole battle there, it was really life lessons that were in there about how Atlanta became Atlanta, and how you got to be a father, you got to teach them this, and even if it was in a comical way, I got to teach you certain things, which is why I used to work for the Men's Fatherhood Coalition, and I saw a lot of men who were going through these situations. I was in the courts, listening to these guys tell the stories about how they've been alienated from their kids, and they've been trying to do these different type of things, and the whole child support system and all of that. And when I was listening to Kendrick talk, I was like, man, this is a lot of the type of same stuff that I've already experienced working for the Fatherhood Coalition. So I've appreciated his attack, and it just lets you know, and it shows you how immature Drake really is when he doubled down calling people slaves again. It's like, come on, man.
As a
like, come
Mange
on,
brother,
dude.
I'm telling you, it was not a good day for the lights. You know what I mean?
Listen, exactly. I wasn't even gonna call you out, my light skinned brother, but we're one up on
Drake,
right
you
now.
cannot be saying this in 2024. Like, yo,
Yeah.
like I never forget, man, because it's like it becomes one of those things where, and I think it's another thing too, like especially being from the South, hearing rhetoric like that, I'm really, 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 really sensitive to it. And I remember one time a while ago, hanging out with a black female friend of mine, and she had like a white homegirl of hers, and this woman was a lawyer, and she's talking to us, and she's like, the white woman, she's like, oh yeah, a book I had to read in college, it was about this black woman that was traveling through time and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, oh, Kindred. And I'm thinking, we're going to have this great conversation about Kindred, the book, and Octavia Butler, one of my heroes, is a black female author. And the white woman started off, anytime somebody starts off a conversation like this, she says, I know slavery was bad, but. Yo.
But I already know where you're going with it.
Don't do it. And I'm sitting by my black friend, and I'm like grabbing her leg. I'm like, yo, what is your white homegirl about to say? And this is an attorney. And the mother said, well, they made it seem like everybody hated their slaves. Some people love their slaves like family. And I'm like, yo, what is going on? Yo, and the black woman I was hanging out with, the only thing she said to the woman, she says, well, could you do me a favor? She was like, could you not say slaves? Could you say enslaved people? Because, right. But my thing is, that's the only thing you had a problem with that whole damn thing that she said, So those wounds are really, really, really like always there. And like when you have people, especially an attorney, I'm like, oh Lord, I hope she ain't defending black people with those type of ideals. So I'm wondering, like, what made gang culture something that you wanted to invest time, energy, and effort in? Is there something specific about? Because I might not know. Is there an influx of gang culture that's going on in South Carolina or Charleston specifically that made this want to be your thing to push towards? Is what's the origins of you deciding for this statewide tour?
Yeah, so let me back up. Let me back up real quick on the enslavement part. So a quick story about some of that. During Black History Month, I actually wore a dashiki. I wore a dashiki to the state house, and because I'm down my people. I thought I was Nigerian. I was like, oh yeah. So I wore my dashiki to the state house, and you should have heard some of the comments that came from some of these old white folk, right? Some of these old white men. They were like, oh my God, what are you wearing there? Are you going to throw spears in here? Yeah, stuff like that. And I'm like, oh my God, like are they really this ignorant? Like it was some of those different types of comments that were being made. But instead of me talking trash to those individuals and doing that, I actually was able to educate them on it. So I wanted to educate them on what a dashiki was, why I was wearing it, what was the relevance, that type of thing, just so that they know exactly what's going on in my culture, what to be a part of it. And I think those are some of the conversations that we got to do and how we have to address some of these individuals because they honestly, a lot of them just don't know. They just don't know, and they've never even had the opportunity to have those conversations with people like me and you. So I took it as an opportunity to say, you know what, I'm not going to drag them in the media. I ain't going to drag them, from up here. Let's have this conversation. You open the door, I'm walking through it. And I'm gonna force feed you this culture. I'm gonna give it to you all day, and I'm gonna give it to you real. So they don't understand it, man. So with the whole gangs of peace thing, I was actually born in California.
You definitely Team
And I was
Kendrick
born in
right now.
California. So that's what I'm saying. So I was born there. I was born in California. My sister went to Crenshaw High School, so they were in the same neighborhood as Nipsey Hussle. So right up in the '60s. So that's why I know all of that type of stuff. That's going on with the whole gang culture and all that. And that's why I've kind of developed a rapport with a lot of these guys out here, because it's like it doesn't matter where you come from. You can do something different. Like, you don't have to be married to your past. You don't have to be tied down to your past. We got some different things. And a lot of the time when you talk to these young guys or these gang members of these guys, they say, "Man, you don't know what I've been through. You don't know my. You got your suit on. You don't know what I've been through." And I get to be like, "Bruh, actually, I do know what you've been through. I do know what you're talking about. I do that." The very first memory of my life, my older brother, he was running away from home. He was getting disciplined by my dad, and he ran away from home. And the guy that helped him run away from home was a guy he used to sell drugs with. Well, that guy 6 months later shot him in the back and killed him. So my older brother was murdered by a guy who considered his best friend, and they were doing gang stuff and that type of stuff. So that's why I know about gang violence. That's why I know about drugs. That's why I know about the effects of PTSD and trauma and all those different types of things, which is why it has allowed me to connect with a lot of these guys to say, listen, I understand what you're going through, but we can do this together. We can do it a better way.
Of the PTSD, I was on a panel yesterday, since it's Mental Health Awareness Month, talking about anxieties and stress and things like that, and more specifically, how they impact the African American community. A lot of times, what ends up happening, and I made this comment yesterday where I was just saying that sometimes the social media can be such a toxic place in a way. Even if people aren't saying anything difficult or mean, you can look and feel like terrible because you put this idea in your head that you're not achieving as much as you thought you wanted to achieve, and you see all these people doing all these things to make you feel horrible. The other thing I felt like that I talked about is the conversation about mental health in the Black community. It's been really, really difficult, right? I have two country Black parents, and both of them were dealing with cancer diagnosis at the same time, in a very, very traumatic situation. And the idea of talking to my father about, hey, maybe you need to go see a therapist, there was this thing like, why would I ever go see a therapist? I'm never going to talk about this. I'm going to push this down, and then one day I'm going to have a stroke. And so one of the things that I thought was really, really interesting is trying to find those type of conversations about being open to, hey, how do we cope with PTSD? How do we cope with these things that we're dealing with? How is the conversation about Black mental health going on for you and your community? What are some of the things that you're hearing with your constituents as well?
Well, things are actually beginning to take a shift. But for the past 400 years, you know what Black folks always said: just pray it away. Just pray. Just pray. Just pray. And it was always frowned upon for us to go out and talk about this problem, because what? It's our family business. We keep it in the house. We deal with it here. So that has been that's been the downfall of a lot of our families, because we haven't dealt with the trauma. We've been, we just kept it in house. We dealt with the pedophile in our house. We dealt with the abuser. We dealt with all those different situations, and we never let it out. We just prayed to God and laid it down. But I'm here today to tell everybody that's listening, it's okay to have Jesus and a therapist, because that can help you out. Because listen, God didn't just bless all these people out here with these skills and abilities for you to keep it to yourself, for you to go through these struggles on your own. So I love therapy. My wife loves therapy. We do therapy for our kids. These different types of things, because we want to break those generational curses. And I go to all these events talking to people. I filed legislation to expand, mental health services in South Carolina to make access easier for people out here in this state, man. Because we're still looking at it as, hey, no, do I want everybody in my business? I don't know about all that. And we're afraid to be judged. We're afraid for people to look at us different. We're afraid for people to look at us crazy or to make a comment on it. But listen, your family is suffering more than what your appearance should be in terms of importance. Your family should take precedence over any of that type of stuff. So I'm happy to say that I see a shift in the change of it. We've done some events over the past like few months to really expand the access to mental health services. So I can see the shift,
Yeah,
but I mean,
I
still a
think
long way to
that
go.
that's fantastic because I think that the issue is you have to find people to normalize those things, right? I remember when I told my dad I was going to therapy, he was like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I was like, damn, dad, you act like I told you I was a Republican. But like, it was just one of those things. Like, but but it's important to be able to normalize those things, and I think that when you're talking about the community seeing someone that looks like you that is of the community being able to run, it can normalize, say, hey, politicians can and should look this way. And my thing is that was always discouraging, and I wonder what your experience is about this, is that I know that theoretically in my mind, someone running for local office should be, hey, I'm in the community. I see a way that I can try to help. Let me try to run for something. And I would see some of these campaigns where, for a council seat, someone has to raise a ridiculous amount of money, sometimes six figures to raise in order to have a chance at winning a type of election. And it can be discouraging, right? Because if someone that's in the community that wants to help doesn't have access to like 100,000 or more to run, it can discourage somebody from wanting to run. And one of the things I think was really, really interesting was that, during the Black Lives Matter protests, George Floyd murders, you saw this influx of a lot of Black and brown people nationwide deciding to run for their local offices, people that never would have had an interest in running before. What were some of your challenges when you decided to run? What got you to run, and how did you kind of overcome some of those things where you could have been discouraged if you're like, man, in order to win a seat, it might cost this or this and this and that. How am I going to do this? What made you do it? Or are you one of those people that won your first election, or did you have to go back to the well again and figure it out? What made you continue to push forward?
I won my first election, man, but yeah. But it takes a bit of ignorance to run for office. To have it takes a little bit of audacity to do some of these things. Because the person who I ran against, he was actually in office for 22 years. So he was a long time incumbent, and I was the young guy. I'm the youngest person to ever represent my district, and I was the first Black. So it was like, oh my goodness, like this guy, he's too young, he's too inexperienced, he looks young. What the heck is it? Like he's being disrespectful. I can't believe he would actually challenge this man here. They were calling him in a dropout, saying these different types of things, but I ignored it. Because what I did is I looked at my 7-year-old. My daughter was 7 years old at the time, and I looked at my 7-year-old Black daughter, and I said, man, well, what does this guy have in common with my 7-year-old Black daughter? How could he inspire her about a future, about of anything? And I was like, man, like we've got to do something about this, man. But when I started, talking about running for office and those type of things, I was on a Zoom call, and I was talking to people on a Zoom call, and I was talking to this congressman. And I was like, man, look, man, they're like, I'm too young. They said, I'm too inexperienced. They're saying this, that, and the third. I shouldn't run. And the congressman was like, he said, Jermaine, you don't need permission from us old folks to run for office. And when he said that, I was like, "Yo, I'm full on in. I'm a former athlete. I'm extremely competitive." I said, nobody's gonna outwork me. So I rode my bike, to different communities. I was knocking on doors. I was doing all the things, and this was right when COVID had started. And the congressman, the person that said it was Jim Clyburn. He was the one who told me that, So I was like, "Oh my goodness!" Because when he got elected, he was early 30s. So it was one of those things where he had some audacity. I had some audacity, and it was like when I announced, they said I was too young to do it. So at that time, I had already had my doctorate. So if you look at my campaign logo, it says Dr. Jermaine Johnson on my campaign logo. I only put doctor on there so people understand that I wasn't extremely young, that I had a little bit more, at least educational experience and business experience than they really assumed in the beginning, because I guess they said I had a young looking face, and I was like, no, I got a wife and kids, man, and everything else. So, I mean, I just had some audacity to do it and change it. Like I said, I went to every single precinct, did all the canvassing on my own. Ran against everybody. I mean, there was the senators and everybody that came out did things against me. But I ended up winning like 77% of the vote, man, and making history.
Everybody's always going to think you're young because black don't crack, but also say beige don't age, right?
Yeah.
Right. So you're speaking about not being a career politician. So my wonder is, if everything could, in a perfect world, happen the way that you want, what would be your plans future wise?
So my plans is really to just leave it the best way that I can. I don't want to be in here 20, 30, 40 years. I don't want to do that. I believe that when there's going to come a day, it may be maybe next term, or maybe in 4 or 5 terms from now, that it's going to be like where I don't feel like I relate to this next generation that's coming up. And when that day comes, that's when I'm going to be able to.
What are you going to do after that? Put on the mixtape? Like, what are you going to do?
I'm going to sit on my porch and I'm going to watch my kids grow up, and coach and volunteer coach and those type of things. I'm going to do some volunteer work, and just sit down and be a family man. Just be a family man with my wife and be able to look at the fruits of my labor. To say, listen, I started this or I did this. You may have recently saw we just got a bill passed. I was the co-sponsor on this bill, myself and Representative Brandon Cox. We lobbied to get a statue of Robert Scott Smalls put on the State House grounds, and we passed it unanimously. We got it passed unanimously, man. So there is going to be a statue of Robert Scott Smalls on the State House grounds, the first and only single African American monument we're going to have on the State House grounds. And I got that passed. My name is going to be on the statue as part of the individual to get that done. I mean, and stuff like that. My great grandkids will be able to say, you know what, my grandfather played a part in putting this history right here on the
Listen,
that's all I want.
There was a point in time when I had the ear of like people that were like writing scripts and pitching things to movie studios and stuff like that. And I'm like, yo, the fact that there's no Robert Smalls movie is the craziest thing that I've ever, absolutely drives me up the wall. So to hear that, I'm so excited about that. And I think that, my father, a little quick story about my dad, is something about old black countrymen and their yards. And so my father worked for.
I got a story for this too. Go ahead, finish. I got a story for this one.
So my dad retired a couple of years ago, worked at his job for like 50 years. And every day this man is always cutting his grass. It's the funniest thing. He's always in the yard. And so around 2021, he's good now. Around 2021, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And we got real nervous, got really, really scared. He had to go through all these rounds of radiation. He had to go through this surgery. And it was one of those things where the doctors were talking to him, and it's like a real serious situation. They try to explain to him, and they say to him, hey, here's the procedure, this and this and this and that. And they're like, all right, Mr. Jacobs, do you have any questions? And the only thing he said was, when can I cut my grass again? Like, that's all. Right. And in a weird way, it sounded so crazy to me, but I'm like, yo, if he came from the rural South, from extreme poverty and extreme, like, just Jim Crow South, my mom and my dad both pick cotton. So the idea of him being able to say, yo, I got my own yard,
Oh my God, man. Listen, I got to tell you the story. Man. So check this out. So I told you my upbringing, I've been homeless. I've lived in motels. I've lived in Motel 6. I've lived in, a bunch of different these places. I slept on my friends' couches, all those different things. And then, I went through all that struggle to become, to be elected and do all this. So I went from homeless to Dr. Jermaine Johnson. Like I got this crazy story, bro. I got a crazy story, right? So one day, I bought, after I was working for the Fatherhood Coalition, I bought my first house right out here, and I was in, and you know how hot it be down here, right? It'd be hot, it get humid and everything. And I said, and I was out in the yard, and I was cutting my grass, right? And I took my shirt off, and I was sweating, man. I was upset. I was so mad because I was like, man, it's hot, and I'm out here. I got to cut this grass. And then at that same moment, God spoke to me, bro. God, God spoke to me and he said, humble yourself. He said, all the things that I have blessed you with up to this point. And I said, I got myself a yard. My exact words. I said, I got myself a yard. I said, all the things that I've been through in my life, I ain't never had nothing. I've been homeless. I went through all this. And here I am complaining about cutting something that God has blessed me with, man. Here I'm complaining about cutting my own grass. And I said, I got off that. I got off my lawnmower. I got in my yard and I started praising God and crying in my yard, throwing my hands up, shouting, saying, Amen, hallelujah. Because I had been blessed with something like that. And I was complaining about cutting something that I've been blessed with that I never had in my life. And I got on back. Like I said, I prayed to God and I got back on my truck and I cut that grass with a smile on my face. You know, we have since moved to a new house now. And my wife, when she be like, we can get somebody to cut the grass. I was no, that's my grass. That's my grass. I'm cutting my grass because I'm so proud of that grass. And I wrote a book. This is why I just shouted when you said something. I wrote a book, and the title of it is "I Got Myself a Yard." And it's crazy that you're telling me that right now. I have a documentary coming out this summer, and the title of the documentary is "I Got Myself a Yard." And I'm gonna send you the preview. I'm gonna send you the preview so you can watch it. It's called "I Got Myself a Yard." It's crazy
This is one of those things
right
where, and this is the thing about Black conversation, where we go through these experiences and we think that all these ideals that we're dealing with is singular. A lot of times there's shared things that we find out that are through trauma. And I don't think this is a trauma thing. I think this is like a Black appreciation thing. You're speaking my father's situation. You're speaking how my dad, looking at, he never knew who his father was and was abandoned when he was a kid and grew up in this type of poverty or whatever. He is, you see that shirt says, "I am my ancestors, wildest dream." That's my father to his generations. And then he's pushing this stuff forward for me to be able to do this, right? So look, for me to be able to to travel around the world rapping, as he called rappity rap, and do it and DJing, right? And to find out, I think you hit the nail on the head about the Southern Black male experience about a yard. Like I give you another example. My if you go to my parents' house, it's to a point where it's annoying. It's like they have like nothing but like tons and tons and tons of sodas all over the place, right? And it drives you crazy. I said, "Mom, why dad buying all these sodas? It's crazy, this and this and that." And then she tells me a conversation that he had with her when they were like first started dating. And my dad said that when he used to pick cotton as a kid, little boy, he said that he would pick cotton like I don't know how many hours during the day, long time during the day, and get 30 cents a day. And he would give like 27 cents to his grandmother, and she would give him 3 cents. He can go buy something or whatever, but he more than likely gave her that money too because she knew she was going to need it. And he said that it was so hot picking this cotton that they would come around and do like one of the little scoops of water, give you a scoop of water. And they had a little guy pushing this thing, those little coolers with Coca-Colas in them. And you got these people picking this cotton, making 30 cents. And they were like, "If you want a Coca-Cola, we're going to take a nickel out of your pay." Right? And so my father developed this thing when he was a kid, where he was like, "Damn it, when I grow up, my kids gonna have Coca-Colas in their refrigerator. They ain't gonna ever," right? And so all of a sudden, I felt awful saying like, "Damn, why is that buying all these damn 12 packs of of Tahitian drink?" Check, Instead of me getting mad, I got mad. I realized that this was something in his mind where this was a dream of his. Like, yo, look, my kids are gonna. My dad could be like, yeah, my dad, like, look, that boy can complain about a lot of stuff. That boy ain't never going to say there ain't no soda in here, right? So it's just one of those things where you kind of discover these nuggets when you're having these conversations with your family. And the thing about it is, I accidentally stumble through these things because I usually joke and I say, when I think of somebody like Alex Haley with Roots, I say to my mom, I say, "Yo, if I was Alex Haley, I could never do this because Alex Haley needed people in his family to be willingly talkative about some of those experiences." And a lot of the trauma that my family dealt with, when you want to ask about it and know about your family history, is so hard, it's so difficult, right? But it gets to the point where when they bring it up, I just have to hush and listen. I'll give you a quick story, and then I got a question for you after this. So my grandmother was the same way. My grandmother, the last conversation I had with her before she passed away around 90 years old. And anytime I would have questions, she'll never talk about it. She'll never bring it up. But the last conversation I had with her, just one day, she just starts talking. And she tells me this, and this is like a mind blower for me. She said that when she was a little girl, for a brief moment of time, her great grandmother used to live with her. And her great grandmother was an enslaved woman at one point in time. And she's telling about this experience growing up with her great grandmother. And it dawned on me. I'm like, well, shit, if my granny interacted with an enslaved relative and I'm interacting with my grandmother, this is 1 degree of separation, right? Like we think that these things are so long ago, but I can talk to my grandmother who experienced someone that went through this horrendous situation, and you feel so connected and have a bigger understanding because you realize it wasn't that far ago. Like these wounds are still here for a lot of these people, and so yeah, I think, man, you about to have me. I'm gonna drive around today, and I see black men cutting their grass today. I'm just gonna take my hat off and just be like, "Yo."
Yeah, absolutely, 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 absolutely. You have no idea those were dreams realized for that individual.
I need that. I need that book. If you need any help with this documentary, like that.
I got you. I got you. They're in post production right now. So they're actually on Juneteenth. They're doing a pre screening in Austin, Texas. Yeah, they're doing a pre screening in Austin, Texas, and they want me to come on out there to be a part of the pre screening. But I mean, me and my wife, we've been watching it, and I tell you, every time we see the little parts of it, I mean, it's just nothing but tears flowing, man, because it tells my life story. It tells all the different struggles I had went through to get to where I'm at. And then it all culminates with the whole story that I just told you about being in the yard and just saying, "Oh my God, like I have a yard, man!" Like, oh my God, man,
That's brilliant, man. I absolutely love that, man. You just made my day with that, and it's also one of those things too, is that a lot of younger people, and I wouldn't even say younger black folks, the housing market is so weird that there's a lot of people that can't get a yard, they can't get a house, and they have to rent. That's why I always thought it was funny. All my friends were like, "Move to New York." I'm like, so I can spend $3,000 to live in a closet? Stop, right? You're like, stop. But home ownership is definitely a really, really huge important thing. And so I guess the final thing that I want to bring up, because I know that we talked about the importance of local politics and local community and being civically engaged, but it wouldn't. It's crazy right now because I feel like with the presidential election that's coming up, one of the things I feel ends up happening to me as a black columnist here in Columbia, that there's not a lot of people that write about these things. I have a column I usually do called Fight the Power, write about hip hop, politics, social awareness. And a lot of times when there's like a lot of like civic unrest or things that's happening within the black and brown community, somehow I feel like, I don't know if I do it myself or the community expects it, I feel like I have this responsibility to write about these things that are affecting people that look like me. And I love to be able to do that. But what ends up happening a lot of times is that I feel like people will be looking for me to have a sense of hope for something. And sometimes I'm kind of don't know what to say. So looking at 2024 presidential election and what's at stake, do you find nuggets of hope that you could, I don't know, that you could tell somebody like me that I might sound like a constituent that might feel like, oh, my vote's not going to matter. Oh, things aren't going to get better. Blah, 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 blah. What do you tell that person that has that feeling of, hey, man, if November don't go the right way, I don't know what to do?
Right. I would tell those individuals to not put so much of your faith in President Biden or President Trump. I would say send them a Congress that they can work with. And those are the ones that I talked about, where it's surely just based off of numbers, numerical values. And so when you get out there to vote, you need to get out there and vote for those people so you can send the support system that president needs. Because if you send that person the support that he needs, let's say it's a Donald Trump that's up there. If you send him the people who are opposed to him in that Congress, he can't do all the damage that he wants to do. If you send a support system for President Biden up there, he can't do all the different things that he wants to do. And that's what we need. That's the misunderstanding about politics, is thinking that these presidents have all the power in the world. You see what happened when we changed that Supreme Court. That's how the Roe v. Wade stuff happened. We've got to make sure that we're sending the right people. We ignore those positions right there because the president, they have term limits, right? These other individuals are sitting up there 40 years. The individuals who are really a part of civil rights are literally still in power today. They're still up there making laws. They're still up there doing those things. If you want to change some of the system, you change some of those people. And we got to get those people out of there and put the right people in there. Start paying attention to the congressional races, and let's stop putting all of our eggs in that basket of that presidential election. And when I talk to those young people, they start to understand, because that's based off of what? Shared numerical numbers.
Well, Dr. Jermaine Johnson, it's been an absolute pleasure. Guys who want to find more information about the New 52 Leadership Development Fellowship, you can find more information about that. Also, if you want to find more about his statewide tour to organize combating gang culture, please look that up. Tell us where people can find you and how they can support and get that book when it come out. How are we going to do that?
Yeah, man. So I'm probably gonna be dropping that this summer. In conjunction with the release of the documentary, because we're also gonna do a tour with that. We're gonna go to about 3 or 4 different parts of the state to do some screenings of that documentary. But when I drop that book, I will make sure to preview it right here with you, man. And we're gonna talk about that, because I feel like we got a kindred spirit going on over here, bro. So we'll do that.
Word. Well, listen, brother, I appreciate it. Keep doing that good work, and I support anything that you do. If you need my help with anything, if you need a voiceover work, you need somebody to DJ a party or something, or help hit the streets for you, let me know. I'm definitely down. I appreciate it, man.
My brother, I appreciate you.
All right, man. This is the Worthy Cause podcast with Preach Jacobs for the Arena Network. Thank you guys for joining us today. We'll be back once again very soon with really amazing, dope people. And we're going to talk about yards and lawns. I'm going to ask everybody from now on what your yard look like. Anyways, thank y'all so much. Talk to y'all soon. And Drake lost. Peace.